Good evening, and welcome to the Audit Chair of the Whole, December 5th, 2023 Audit Committee meeting. Commissioner Patterson, the Audit Chairperson. I'd like to call the Audit Committee meeting of the whole to order. There are speakers who would serve as directing the agenda. And point 3, review and acceptance of the minutes. Minutes from our last Audit Committee meeting, June 6, 2023. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes? June 6 meeting.
Second.
Who's
Commissioner Adam for the
Commissioner
motion.
motion
Second.
and
Commissioner
Commissioner second?
Yes.
Item number 4, resolution.
Are you going to take a vote, Commissioner?
Are there comments to all? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4, resolution of consideration to termed. Number 5, the audit committee discussion items. The next on our agenda is a presentation by Director Malecki, our internal auditor, and an update from our Auditor General, Henry Taylor. Before we get to that, I'd like to thank, both the Director Malecki for doing this internal audit, and we'll give thanks to Mr. Wheeler, Auditor General, for the hard work she does to make it look good. So thank you. You can be. Could you repeat your name again, Mike? Thank you.
Matt Montalbo, partner of Josh Malecki, and Corey Spence-Skoll, she's the manager on the audit engagement. Thanks for having us this evening. We're here to provide the results for Rochester City School District's external audit for the year of June 30th, 2023. We have a PowerPoint presentation for the group. Take through the slides on our first slide. We'll run you through the audit plan and just briefly discuss and visit what we talked about in June as far as the audit plan, then move on to our record communications on the audit. We'll talk about some financial highlights for the year to June 30, 2023, and then wrap with some of our other reports and final observations in the audit. So starting with the audit plan, as discussed during the June meeting, we talked about some of the key areas that we'd be looking at, and that there is a more risk. Can everyone hear me? We did your cash investment, the receivable revenues, as well as your account payables, federal grant compliance, some of the areas, contingent liabilities, capital assets. Now, these aren't all the areas we look at. As part of the financial audit, you're responsible to put on all the elements of finance statements, but we look at because of high dollar value, high volume, high exposure. Those really we got the key items tested. So we perform specific procedures in these items, get it all to assurance. The next slide, we're just talking about your overall risk. First, the management override internal controls. So this is what we look at when we first come in and look at your internal control processes, that you have the ability to override those processes or those controls in place. So we don't have any findings in the area. Your control found these solid, strong internal control system. As far as when I talk about cash investments, we look at all your reconciliations. We also do some confirmation from your financial institution as far as balances, along with observing those balances. No findings in that area. As far as receivables or revenues, and payable interest. So these are your accrual items. So items that are on your balance sheet at your end, but the cash hasn't come in the door yet. So this is a high exposure area for government, specifically the receivable side, because you're essentially saying we have this money coming in. So it's millions and millions of dollars from other governments, whether the state, the federal government, that you incur expenditure, that money hasn't come in the door yet. So this is a high risk area for us. And what we actually do is we actually look at the major balances that are outstanding, and we look at the subsequent cash receipt for each one of those items. So verify that the cash comes in the door subsequent to your end. And it's just compliance law and regulations, along with the federal single audit, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. We'll also get your compliance with state laws, budgetary compliance, and there are no findings in this area. Then finally, the long-term items we talked about on the previous slide, these are your contingent liabilities. A lot of these are long-term assets or liability of the district. So there's probably a lot of discussion pension liabilities, about your retiree health insurance liability, that ultimate liability the district owes employees based on your contractual agreements and arrangements in New York State. These are pretty standard estimates that we rely on a lot of outside third-party specialists to project those liability, and our role is to evaluate whether they're reasonable. So we were able to obtain the reports of actuaries or outside specialists. In case we were looking at your legal counsel as well. So we're able to get all those and find comfort or no findings in those areas as well. We're able to reasonably determine the estimates were appropriate. Moving into the required communications, so that's kind of looking backwards at the audit plan and our risk areas. What we do now is these are our auditor communications. I want to highlight a couple items here. First of all, what's the responsibilities of external auditors? And we clarify this because we want to clarify that management is really responsible for your financial information. They're responsible for preparing the book and records. They're responsible for the financial statement, that annual comprehensive financial report that you're looking at. Our role is come as an independent third party and provide an opinion on financials. So do they fairly represent Rochester School District's financial position and results of operations? You, the board, can you rely on financial information being presented to you in making your important budget and operational decisions? So we do plan, and we did issue a unmodified opinion. So that is a clean opinion on the financial statements. So based on our audit, concluded that the city school district financial statements are fairly stated for their end of June 30th, 2023. So that's the best you can from that standpoint. We're never going to say they're 100% complete because we look at every single transaction, but we believe that fair state may be relied upon. So other significant areas that are in required communication, your accounting practices. This includes your significant policies, your significant estimates, and significant disclosures. All of those are encompassed in that annual comprehensive financial report. Our responsibility is to evaluate each one of the areas and conclude whether the reasonable consistently applied. We didn't have any issues with the policy estimates or disclosures. We believe that you're accurately complying with the accounting standards in your report. As far as correct and correct misstatements, so these would be if came across any errors related to the prior periods or the current period. So do you have a significant error with your financial statement that would mislead the users? We did not identify any significant items or uncorrected or correct misstatements. So like I said before, we believe that your statements are fairly stated or fairly present without interior error. And then as far as the matters, we did not have any difficulties performing the audit. We received full and open access to the books and the records. What we're particularly impressed with was the accessibility of management staff. So we were able to access several different departments and several different staff for interviews, for information gathering. So we really appreciated the accessibility and responses of the district. Those are the required communications. Questions on before we move to more financial highlights?
Any questions from the commission? Questions, continue.
All right, getting to the financial highlights. Myself and Corey will run you through the financial area and the different, reasons for the operations. The first slide, we start with general fund, and this is your revenues versus your expenditure over a 5-year period, so a 5-year trend. The blue line represents your revenues, red line represents your expenditures. You can see for the last 4 fiscal years, you've increased fund balance. So revenues are your expenditures generating fund balance in a year. The last year, you had a decrease with 18-19, so you've been able to kind of reverse that trend through your budgeting over the last few years. We'll talk a lot about the different components of that. Certainly, you look at this is pretty consistent across school district New York State, the last 2 fiscal years, and then your current fiscal year. A lot of the story is COVID funding. So under the education stabilization programs, you receive through CARES Act, through CURSA, and then going forward, American Rescue Plan. The funding has significant impact on how financial states of school districts look. Because if you notice the red line, your 21-22 expenditures are pretty consistent with 22-23. Kind of against what you expect, right? You're adding programs, adding staff. Corey's talking about how that money is able to be shifted to your F fund or your special fund out of the general fund. And a lot of those operational expenditures allow on those COVID funding programs to be brought out of the general fund and matched against the fund source. So expenditures look a little bit lower than they actually are because of the point. But it does lead to an increase in funds in general fund, and again, consistent with what we're seeing in other school districts. So the increase for 2023 was approximately $55 million. That's the amount the general fund increased fund balance in total. Corey's going to kind of break down the next couple slides the specific revenue and expenditure area cause things.
Okay, so going down slide 5, show the breakout of the revenue sources and expenditure by function. You see the 23 column left in the prior year, 2022. So like I said, surplus was recognized this year. That was a $5 million balance increase. You can see that at the bottom there. And what it constitutes is $815 million in revenues 2023 and $760 million for expenditures. Looking at those revenue sources, the one really jumps out when you look at the change from year to year is that state federal sources, which increased to $10 million. This is mainly state base aid, lottery aid, as well as federal aid is grouped in there as well. And some other big increases on the revenue side, you see in salary operating compensation for loss, as well as use of money in operating. This mainly due to great interest earnings, better interest rate that we've seen this past year, as well as some recoveries that the district also received. And then on the bottom half, use the expenditure function. The biggest one that jumped out when you let it is that $15 million decrease. So looking at the general support line in combination with the instructional line, it's about $11 million net decrease, which kind of alluded to is the result of that education stabilization fund, covering the salary utility costs in that fund. So the general fund is able to save some money on the ones. And then also some other big increases, transportation costs going up, less effect of COVID on the list of the transportation, as well as benefits, some increases in health insurance costs as well. And then moving on to the next slide, this shows the 5-year trend of the general fund balance. So as we did to use those surplus, those increases over the past 5 years, with 2022-23 ending about $224 million. And this also breaks out the restricted portion, which is that blue portion and unrestricted portion. So on the next slide, we actually look at what makes up unrestricted portion. We have a little table to show the last 5 years, and we also included below and there just some comparisons. But as far as the unrestricted fund balance, that encompasses your mid, your assigned, your unassigned. Committed fund balance are as funds aside by the board, specific reasons to be spent on. Some year one, that one of those post-employment benefits, the Matt mentioned about $27 million commit for that. There's also insurance claims, works comp, and health insurance. And then the next line down is the assigned fund balance, and this is $74 million. This is less restricted commitments, but is assigned balance by management and recommended to the board. Some of the ones in this classification included final payment of the state loan that the district had about $30 million, as well as some low fund or capital products, about $25 million there. And looking at the bottom of the graph or table, you can see the total unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of year's budget. This is thing to look at, and GFOA puts out as a practice that it's reasonable to maintain about 2 months worth of operating expenses in your online funds, which is 16%. You can see districts at 22.1% with like the healthy increase year over year since 2018.
Actually, the best practice they stated as minimum. So minimum balance for flexibility, for liquidity. If you go back, look in comparison where Buffalo and Syracuse are a little bit higher, but I think you look at we were in 2019 and to where you are today, certainly stay position going forward. Talk a lot about challenges for future budgets, but you know where you can snap at as 2023 to stable condition.
Thanks, Matt. And the next slide, we included some highlights from of the other government fund in the district. So there's one special fund had $239 million in state and federal grants. There's an increase from last year, balance about $104 million. And the main increase we've been talking about is due to the education stabilization funding, which is your ARCRA, that increased to $72.7 million. The school survey fund is pretty consistent from the prior year. Had an increase in fund balance of $612,000. The service fund also increases to transfer about $77 million. The general fund and it's used to pay debt service costs. Last year was at $78 million. So pretty consistent with prior year. And the last one is capital projects fund. There was about $23.2 million in capital expenditures for 2023, comparing to $28.5 million in 2022. This fund so is some long-term financing, about $50 million during there, so I was able to bring the balance to $9 million. It'll be used to fund future products for the district. And some of the other reports that we have included in our engagement is the federal single audit report. So this includes all of the district's federal spending occurring year, and we look at a handful of the major programs. We do testing for compliance. For this year, we did testing over 4 programs. The Education Stabilization Fund being a big one, as I'm aware, and then Child Nutrition Cluster, Special Ed Cluster, and Adult Education Program. And we had a clean opinion, the federal single audit, and we didn't have any compliance fines. The second one is the report on the district's classroom activity funds. These encompass all the student-run clubs that's on the cash basis financial statement. We look at cash received, cash persons, and do some testing there. Overall, very clean opinion and had no findings in regards to the classroom. And then lastly, we did the contract for excellence agreed on procedures. This isn't quite intense and off, but it agreed on procedures where we look at district's clients with that verification requirement. We looked at payroll and persons and then annual certification, make sure that the district's in compliance at.
As far as our overall observations, we do have with it the management report, future report requirements. There's no, so basically we included no material weakness and significant deficiencies in internal code. So those would be items that would be required in writing. We do have some future report requirements similar to the current. You're required to implement certain governmental accounting standards board statements. These are the ones as you look forward. We also follow on any past comments, past audit or deficiency. This was within the classroom fund. A lot of items were noted regarding receipt documentation, receipt process. We noted improvement. We noted that there were no transactions that we cited or simple did not have adequate documentation. And I know it has been an area of focus for the district as improved area. And just as far as concluding on the overall financial condition, certainly the district, we saw those trends as far as where the balance is gone, where you're assigned unassigned balance at percent of your budget. So your stable position as of the end of 2023. Going forward, this is the conversation we're having with our districts. The ARPA funding or the good funding is it temporary funding. So that's all the budget challenges. We saw how significant those amounts were that were able to shift out of the general one and come back in the budget eventually. Discussing with management already, the current year you're going to some of those funds still include, but when you're looking at 24-25 budget, that's be the challenge. And I talked to some of our big city school districts. That's what they're currently going through those discussions. We're going to maintain the programs and maintain the funding to do the important work that you're doing. So certainly something to start a conversation there. I know you have. So all, big clean audit. From first perspective, again, from our perspective, we want to thank and this especially as well as Carrie. They were kind of our 2 people for the audit and helped facilitate communication with the other department. We talked to a lot of people and a very difficult and challenging project, especially in the first year where you're piling all the documentation for take our complete. So we appreciate the help. But at this point, we'll take any questions, the presentation or concerns.
Okay, well, thank you very much for our report. Really appreciative. I'm going to step to my left with Commissioner Paul.
Thank you. I have questions. So you tell me if you want to do one time or all at once.
2 questions, you're good. Thank you.
All right. So slide 5 under vendors. I know in particular the use of the high, change on benefits. You mentioned healthcare in particular. Understanding that we are a self-insured organization. There was some conversation prior years about the likelihood of healthcare costs going up because of healthcare visits postponed or delayed because of COVID. The total differential between the years is less than 4%. We say we just didn't experience that, or is it something we might still see ahead of us?
It's difficult to quantify because the timing of when certain things happen, certainly your population itself is different from, other districts' population. So it's difficult to pinpoint with health insurance. And we recommend is always curve it in those years that you save, where you kind of go below your expectations, put that on the aside because there's going to be years where you can almost bust through budget. So it's difficult to answer the question, but I think from our standpoint, I don't know that you can necessarily total discount that. You want us conservative with health insurance for sure.
Okay. My second question is looking at the change in general support, and suppose for argument's sake on the slide, slide 5, expenditures general report, the first line, we see a $50 million negative. So, and I think we said that it was largely because our concur were able to displace. So, and the question is, when I look at that and then look down at change in the fund balance, it kind of looked like once we have no more work, so we have about 1 year's worth of sort of bankrolls. And looking at the fund balance, just looking at this page, one could come to the conclusion we have about 1 good year before we have to start tightening our belts again.
It's short window and you can see where would you ever anticipate $50 million decrease in any of your major expenditure categories in any given year? Only you look at instruction where $3.7 million increase, that's less than 1% from prior year. So obviously this cost come back at some point, either the 25 year shortly after, but that's a significant impact, absolutely. And it's present a lot of challenges for districts, especially bigger cities districts.
Yep, I was going to get my lab with the superintendent, and again, we can get to 2 questions, and anything else the commission have, they put in the mission law. Thank you. Superintendent, want to go to the president? Can you okay. Elliott?
No questions.
Commissioner Sims?
Yes. Thank you for presentation. Just absorbing the information. It's a good thing. And I'm like, nothing's wrong. Do you find anything? A hair out of place? It's a good. So that's what I wanted to know is, based on your expertise, you said you worked a lot of big districts. Cautionary tales are we need to be watchful. You've kind of mentioned, but I did some sobering information because this is historically not the position, and this speaks to diligence we're putting forward now. What are the cautionary tales that we should be looking at?
Yeah. All right. There's a lot of cautionary tale. First one starts with information technology, cybersecurity. So we do test your information technology systems. We look at your cybersecurity controls. We didn't identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. So the positive, still everybody's vulnerable. Even if you have best controls in place, one person clicks on the wrong link and it's down the entire system. So that is number one, because we're so reliant technology and becoming more and more reliant as we're including new software programs, implementing all different measures. That's going to be the one area of an internal control stand that could really have a significant impact. The other cautionary tale, I will talk about succession planning. And this is public sector across the board, probably the biggest internal issue that you're potentially going to be dealing with over the next 5 to 10 years because of the aging generation of baby boomers that are retiring around the same time. And kind of the challenge, I think, public sector is inspiring the next generation of whether it be college students or young professionals to take interest in public sector, and whether it be in finance, buildings around, all of your departments. It's really a challenge. So what you can do is identify where biggest risks are. So what part do we know we have an individual that has so much knowledge, 30 plus years of knowledge that could potentially walk out the door. That's where we see a lot of, especially in our internal audit hats, where that with districts where we see the big issues is when someone leaves and the knowledge go with them. When the errors start to happen, that's when the mistakes start to happen. Talking with management, it seems like you have a ton of issue there, but you're also having those conversations, so that's a good thing.
Jump in quick, Commissioner Mo, if you don't. Yes, familiar with what you're saying about IT and cybersecurity and things that it's very important for this board to know that not only one person, entity, should have a working knowledge or specific knowledge with something. It'd be a team of individuals. So if individuals don't talk, God forbid that individual passes, we can continue meeting with someone else, picking up the baton where individual stuff. So thank you for saying that.
That would be best practice, definitely.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thanks so much for your presentation. Love the IT comments, but questions time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, just curious about 602,000 for school system. That left over me, this unmet.
So what is similar to the general one is the amount of your revenues in that unexceeded expenditure. So that is the increase in your fund balance based on activity of the year.
It would be remiss of me to mention, I apologize that the state internet master, AC is on Zoom along with the Vice President Lon. Do everyone have any questions for the auditors?
Hear me? Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I apologize. We are having technical issues today on Zoom. So I hear you guys all see, but I cannot see anything. I'm also watching on YouTube, so I can see you all. No question at this time, but I do want to comment that this is a vastly different report that we had in a number of years. I am very happy where we're at financially. And I do agree with the comment that with the due diligence this money is leaving ARPA. And I think that's what challenges are going to come in. Because there's really won't be enough money to fund everything that we have on ARPA and everything we sustain everything. That's just reality. Happy to hear. And I just also want to give those to these auditors Because this is their first time with district. We are a very large organization to audit. And I know that there's some concern last year from city council, but I think the audit happened, no one lost anything, no one was dramatically impacted, the finances will continued to be stable, and I just to put up there. So I'm glad that the results are the results that they are, but I want to also bubble up that for the next year or so as we work in this budget season, we will have to take some hard look things, make difficult decisions in the next year or two. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah, Senator? Okay. Oh, thank you. We have a question by Commissioner to my left.
Thank you to CFR for just, being no drama CFO. I mean, it's been a joy. It's a little bit like having a president you don't really notice doing stuff because there's no drama on it. So thank you.
Questions? Feel free to go.
Actually, we are included after one item, one short update. The opportunity is presented if the board did want to have confidential discussion with the external auditor. This was the first time it's thing we generally do. That's a board discretion. That's the use not to have. Are you still going to have that? No, I don't see a response.
Yes, do you want to?
I just want to make sure that is thing. So I will put my 8 then prior to that. Okay.
I'm going to talk about the asset report, or I'm doing that part.
I will do.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Okay, so on the 20, I did send you guys a draft of financials, the comprehensive financial report. I did send a draft at that time. We didn't have the final opinions from auditors yet. We did have all the final documents that we had gone through. I just want to leave an opportunity for the board to feel free to send me any remaining questions. If there's any questions that you would like to hit on this evening, we can go with that. But I'm sure you all had some opportunity. An overview from Shrimulke did hit finance statements and results of this particular effort. The average prepared part of accounting just recognize Carrie Cole's been this for the last many years, who has the appreciation of the firms very closely. Sure was a great source to us this year in assisting. So my question is, are any outstanding questions? And if not, I will go on. Please do send in questions. This report will be going before the 21st. It's going to be for adoption. So if I get questions to that date, I'd happy to share the results, the responses with all the members. That is the after. In addition, I just want you to notice on separate cover, we have issued the extracurricular student activity fund report. Again, is an modified opinion, one we've not had in some time. Just want to highlight, there's considerable work in a particular area, which includes having central repository for all support for Transact, which will facilitate our auditors have the information they required. In addition, the accounting staff formally, proactively reached out to various schools and club leaders and showed them that the training was taking place. If you recall, last year, management letter did have that as a recommendation that we need to continue to work in a particular area. And so I'm very pleased we were able to come back out an unmodified opinion in this area. So I want us to acknowledge that. The single audit again, which is great. We continue a low audit is very helpful as it comes through our audit process. The work of Office Auditor General and their work. The one update I did want to provide that I did meet with the superintendent, and as we periodically do monthly meetings together. One of the items, knowing when all of the changes that take place. We actually did a quick review in placement area based on some concerns, knowing that we so much transition getting ready to happen. So we expect over the next week so those findings to be go over those management. It happens to exist in Deputy Turner's shop. So we'll be going over both finding recommendations, look for efficiencies, hope we have a somewhat to improve the control environment in basement. That's an additional small project that did, but we thought was extremely critical from a standpoint of so much going on with all the school transitioning and concerns have been expressed from the various board members. In addition, our next board meeting, our audit committee will be hitting all outstanding reports. So you'll be able to see the result of remaining that we have. We're anticipating still education, transportation, attendance, and if I do actually do place work under other committee, will also be placed at that time.
Did you want to know the next scheduling?
Question if I can adjust. I'm reading, look at the effort now and I'm seeing that I'll do this question to superintendent that the district satisfied its full 2004 5% obligation with ICE, which included a $20 million loan as well as an annual advance of revenue of a alternative to this constraint. Then was the repeat of 30-year at zero interest deductions of the annual timber lottery aid advantage of each year in effort to address this monitor's recommendation that debt, reduce debt remain loan of $9.8 million fully satisfied in the fiscal year 2022-23. So just want to commend the district on that. But you want to talk a little bit about that, Dr. Purcell?
Yeah, thank you, President. The question, CFR and had multiple discussions about this. This was an interest-free loan that we could have kept and used and then wait for multiple years. But we also understand that we ran ourselves into trouble and we need to get the loan, get out of trouble. So from after show state that we're in stable grounds, one of the middle, we paid that off quickly as we could, and we're ending our own 2 feet personally, moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Patrick.
Yes. At point in time, I'm sorry, Commissioner Miles.
Any question for Auditor General Wheeler? I'm looking at page 29, and see, just unbalanced page. Of course, I'm going to quite about funds, right? Understanding this is 2023, there are a number of items in the assigned category that, according to the policy adopted earlier this year, would move into the restricted. namely the New York State Unemployment Insurance, and in the committed category worker comp is all going to move to restricted according to policy. Am I correct about that?
I want to get back to you on that because I do remember making sure in this, so far recall, I remember when we spent the time working through the unbalanced classifications, but our reference would be to back and let you know exactly how to prevent entropy is based upon updated policy.
That is a question of future reporting, not that I do believe that we change policy going forward, not looking back. Thank you.
Further questions? Not. Can I motion for the annual final report is 21st of this meeting? Moved by Commissioner Bay, seconded by Commissioner Howell. Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
I slight cheat and gave an update my last comment, so we can move on to your executive.
Executive session. All right, this meeting recess. An executive session for a confidential discussion with the external auditor. Have a motion?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons, second.
Stated. You just stated it.
Does that include, says board may discuss matters related to the employment of a particular individual? Does that apply?
Not apply, so it's global state.
In favor? Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you. We're back from executive session, and we have a quorum. So I'm going to close out the audit committee meeting and ask that the board members please complete your board survey. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Commissioner Powell,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Simmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. And then once again, the next audit committee meeting is scheduled for March 19th, 2024. I am now going to turn the meeting over to Commissioner Powell.
Why, thank you, Commissioner Patterson. Let's see, we're missing one board member and our commissioners-elect. I'm going to be asking our commissioners-elect to sit up on the dais with us. I think there are just enough empty seats for that to happen. So if you don't mind, I'd like to call for a couple minutes recess in order for all the seats to be filled.
Didn't we go through this before though? And didn't legal advise us not to do that? I feel like we had this issue when it was Amy and Ricardo.
Please.
Yep, so my opinion is I would prefer that not occur, to be honest with you. I think, could the board allow that? Yes, I think the board could allow that, in the same way that we allow parent representatives and others at the dais. I think I would prefer, if it's going to be allowed, it is a decision that the body makes as a whole. The commissioners-elect obviously can't vote on things or make motions or anything of that sort. But I don't think it's per se, it's unlawful. I could see how it could cause some confusion, so I would defer to the body as a whole to decide whether you want to allow that, but I don't think it's unlawful.
So Commissioner Malloy wasn't here to hear that. So let me catch her up. In addition to waiting for you, I was saying that I'd like to call our commissioners-elect to share the dais with us. My reasoning is that the policy 2300 was sent back to committee with the express purpose of getting the input from our commissioners-elect. So I think I'll put it to a vote. To our commissioners-elect, I just asked the body if they would allow for you to, as commissioners-elect, to join us on the board and participate in the discussion about policy 2300. As Commissioner Adams had, during our meeting last night, specifically asked that we get input from the new board members. So that's what even if we wait for them to come up just until that portion of the meeting. So I see some nonverbal communication. Let's just start from your end, Ricardo, and work our way through.
So that is not exactly what I stated. I stated that I thought this board should not proceed. I'm going to be against this. I'm going with the advice of counsel. Council recommended we not do this that way. And so I'm going to go with that.
Commissioner Malloy?
Yeah, this is nothing against our commissioners-elect. I can't wait for them to join the board, but I'm going to defer to council on this as well. I don't think at this time for the discussion of said policy would be wise. They'll have the opportunity to discuss this, we hope, in the next year.
Commissioner Simmons?
I'm going to defer to general counsel.
Well, let me ask just one thing. General counsel did not say it was unlawful, but all three of you are saying that you interpret his recommendation to be that they not join us on the dais.
It causes confusion, in my opinion.
And for clarification, I am not under the impression that General Counsel is stating that it is unlawful, but he has given some advice that I am going to align with. Thank you.
Commissioner Elliott?
With the advice of counsel.
Commissioner Patterson?
Personally, I'm in the business of building relationships. And I think it's very important that we welcome you both with open arms, to this board. And it's very important that whatever we do here tonight, that you're going to have to work with our decisions. So for me, why wouldn't I want you, if you're in the room, you're present, to be a part of those decisions? It doesn't matter if we do it now or wait till January. So I welcome you, to sit up here with me, as my colleague, beginning tonight, not even to wait until January. So I want to hear your opinions. I don't want to wait till January to hear what you have to say. I want to know what you have to say right now, and the public really wants to weigh in and not weigh in, but know what you want to say. And if it's not until January, it's now, then so be it. But again, that's my opinion. I respect my colleagues and the attorney, Adrian Neal. But that's my feeling on the matter, that, if we're into building relationships with you, at any point in time, we should be welcoming you. Thank you.
Commissioner Powell?
Ask Commissioner LeBron, did you have anything more to add on this topic?
Yeah, I just want to clarify too, that in the past, legal's advice was also that it's not unlawful, but other than it causes confusion. And this is not personal to anybody.
Yeah.
And this is not about building relationships. For me, this is about us doing the right thing at all times. This has nothing to do with people joining the school board. They still have to get sworn in to be a legal commissioner publicly serving, which has not happened. The election has happened and they are considered elect commissioners-elect. So for that reason, I'm just stating, we've already gone down this rabbit hole with other commissioners and other legal advice, same legal advice that was received 2 years ago. I just want to point that out too. It was never that it was illegal, just that it is confusing to the public coming in and watching and seeing that there are 2 additional people who are not elected. That is like having the public sitting up there
Not
at this
sworn in.
point. So that's all.
Okay, well, I think I saw definitely 4 votes, 5 votes in opposition. But
Yes, and can I make a quick statement? So there's nothing preventing the commissioners-elect from giving their input from the podium as requested by the board or you. So there's in the very same way that we solicit input from the public relating to these policy readings. So there are many, many avenues for not only the commissioners-elect, but the general public to submit feedback as these policies go through the readings.
Thank you. I really appreciate that observation. And so I will take the prerogative of the chair to call upon you to speak at the microphone there when the time comes. Okay? Commissioner Malloy.
I just hope that you recognize that we welcome both of you. We can't wait to work with you. And please don't make our personal opinions on this. Please don't be alarmed in any way. We do welcome you, and we are interested in, I can only speak for myself, actually. I'm interested in forming close relationships and working collaboratively with both of you. And can't wait to have these discussions with you once you're sworn in on the board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just need to say this because 4 years ago when I was elected, I went through the same thing, and I was not invited up here. Commissioner Powell came and asked me how I would vote. She did not invite me to nothing. And that was a really big deal. When all that money was, we couldn't find out. 2019, December 19th was the date. Nobody invited me, and I probably shouldn't have, but I did. I recall telling Commissioner Powell that in spite of my kids and family being out there protesting, that I would have voted like she voted, because I believe the charter school or somebody would have came and took over, So it's some history to this. It ain't personal.
Okay, so that matter being resolved, Do I have a motion to accept the agenda as prepared?
Motion.
Commissioner Patterson, a
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Malloy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we still have Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I.
Okay, thank you. Okay. There are no speakers on the agenda. We do have minutes from June, whoops, I'm sorry. Hang on, I've got the wrong agenda in front of me. We do have minutes from November 7th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved?
Moved by Commissioner Elliott, Commissioner Malloy, seconded by Commissioner Adams. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimous. Oh, did I hear Commissioner LeBron?
Yes,
Okay.
I said I.
Okay, very good, thank you. Review of the NISBA policy recommendations. Adrian?
Yes, we do have some updates from NISBA related to several policies. A number of them are optional policies for us or just recommended. There are a few that are required updates. We did review these in a preview meeting, and the district is in pretty good shape. We've already started internal discussions on some that we plan to bring to the board's attention sooner than later. Prioritize, there are a couple we want to prioritize, like the workplace violence prevention policies. If there are any specific questions related to any of the updates, I will take those. But other than that, overall, we're in pretty good shape.
Are there any questions for our general counsel? Seeing none, we'll move on. 3A is Code of Conduct Committee. We have no updates from that. Item 4A, suspension presentation.
Good evening. Good evening, President Elliott, Vice President LeBron, Chairperson Powell, and the board commissioners and superintendent. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you some of our suspension data and interventions that we are implementing in our schools with you this evening. The district overall suspension rates and out-of-school suspension rates in 22-23 have decreased from the previous year of 21-22, although they're still slightly higher than they were in the pre-pandemic year of 18-19. Meanwhile, the district in-school suspension rate for 22-23 has increased slightly from that in 21 and 22, and the in-school suspension rate is lower than our pre-pandemic levels in 18-19. Here we have some data in regards to unduplicated suspension using a 4-year comparison. As you can see in a color chart, we have 18-19, which is blue, 19-20, which is red, orangish, and 21-22, which is gray, and 22-23, which is the yellow. And as you can tell, the overall unduplicated suspension rate in 22-23 has decreased slightly from the previous year. Suspension rates for Black and African American students remains relatively flat, while the rate for students with disability has dropped from the year before. Just as a note, these are the two key subgroups of focus of our New York State Office of Attorney General citation that we're working to address. Next, we have the unduplicated out-of-school suspension rates, also again using a 4-year comparison. And those rates have dropped by a percentage point from the year before, and our out-of-school suspension rates for both Black and African American students and students with disabilities have decreased by almost 1 percentage point from the year previous. Next, we have our unduplicated in-school suspension rate, again using a 4-year comparison. Here we have schools with the highest unduplicated suspension rate in 22-23 school year. As you can see the 4-year data also for these schools that are cited here. And also, we have schools with the lowest unduplicated suspension rate for the same year, 22-23. And they've also have maintained a relatively low suspension rate in the past 5 years as well. So year to date, suspension data that we want to share with you. If we look here, we have our district overall suspension numbers and rate year to date for 22-23 and 23-24. So that means starting of the school year up until November 15th. As you can see, there is a decrease in 23-24 compared to 22-23 in our suspension rate. Here we have the out-of-school suspension rates, again using year-to-date comparison of 22-23 and 23-24. In 22-23 was 5.1%, and as you can see, 23-24, 3.8% using the start of the school year data up until November 15th. And here is our district overall in-school suspension number and rates. Again, 22-23 and 23-24 up until November 15th. As you can see, that has remained relatively flat. Here is our unduplicated suspension rate, a 2-year comparison using our subclass. So you see overall district and then broken down by race and ethnicity, and also L students and students with disability and general education students. So our year-to-date unduplicated suspension rate in 23-24 have decreased across almost all key subgroups except for Asian when compared with the same period from the year before. And that's because our number of Asian students are relatively low. So if you have 1 or 2 suspended, you're going to see that increase there. Here's our out-of-school suspension rate, again, using the 2-year comparison, using the district and also race and subclass in regards to L students, students with disability, and general education students. So our out-of-school unduplicated suspension rate in 23-24 have decreased across almost all our key subgroups, again, with the exception of our Asian population when compared with the same period from the year before 22-23. Our year-to-date students with disability out-of-school suspension rates has remained flat. Here is for our in-school suspension rate, again using the same matrix as previously. So our district overall year-to-date in-school suspension unduplicated suspension rate in 23 and 24 has remained flat from the previous years. Major subgroups as Black and African American male students with disability has seen a drop in the in-school suspension rate from year to year. Here is a side-by-side bar to just show you the top schools with the highest year-to-date unduplicated suspension rate versus the schools with the lowest year-to-date suspension rates. And to show you a comparison of 22-23 to 23-24 year-to-date. Next, we have schools showing the biggest drop in year-to-date suspension rate between 22-23 and 23-24. So our theory of action is that if the Rochester City School District reduces suspension, students will face less disruption in terms of their learning experiences and opportunities to be involved in classroom instruction, complete assignments, and benefit from the learning process. and experience a positive school climate, promoting psychological well-being among students, a supportive environment that encourages emotional stability, reduces stress, and enhances students' well-being, which will lead us to improved academic outcomes. So what we've done in the next couple of slides for you is just included some of our iReady math, ELA, Z-Zone, Z-scores for suspension indicators. And basically, the idea being that a Z-score represents where a student scores on a test falls in relation to his or her peer. The higher the Z-score, the better they did compared to their peers. And understanding that when students are, the correlation between student suspension and academic outcomes, both for math, ELA, capturing grade 7, K through 7, and also GPA data that is included in our next slide. So this data indicates that the more likely a student is to be suspended, the lower their GPA will be. So we share some data with you. We want to talk about what are some of the interventions and work that schools are implementing to help address student suspension and to help reduce student suspension. We're really utilizing our ROC restorative team along with our school-based support staff like our social workers, school counselors, some of our SEL coaches to help address this using our tiered level of support. Tier 1 being, which is everybody in that particular school has supports and exposure. Tier 2 being primarily for those 15% of students, and Tier 3 being generally 5% of the population that needs a Tier 3 level of support. So what are we doing in Tier 1? So all school improvement plans have an intentional academic culture goal, and each of them have been assigned a ROC restorative coach to help support them in implementation of that academic culture goals. And also, we're doing a lot of work with our educator training, such as community building, restorative mindset, affective language, and how to have restorative conversations. Student trainings, we continue to train students across the district in circle facilitation, in affective conversations and peer mediation, and also school-based support. As we said, we work with school-based teams to help them implement restorative practice, and also using the multi-tier level of support to see where there might be a gap in services and try to provide some support where those gaps are highlighted. And working with our elementary and secondary professional learning experiences. So previously, we would have monthly professional learning experiences with our schools, including both the secondary and elementary staff. This year, we've separated them, listening to some of the feedback we got from them. And each month, representatives from the groups come together for about 2 hours and learn and practice ways to better support and build community in their schools. So that's been taking place monthly. Also, student voice and agency work to really help schools understand the importance of authentic student voice and agency, and how students could also be a solution to some of those issues that need to be addressed. So doing a lot of work, and you'll hear more about that in the coming months with our Student Leadership Congress, but also in our, primarily in our high schools, establishing a group of students who can help their administrators, teachers, right, and also their peers learn how to build a positive school climate and community together. We also have partnership with Ibero, who's been supporting our work in training our district around restorative practice philosophies and having the benefit of Spanish bilingual support to help implement that training with our staff and our students. Tier 2 is, and you'll hear a little bit about this, you'll hear a lot more about it in a little while, is something that we started a couple of months ago. Is we've asked schools to engage in re-engagement once a student has been suspended and is coming back to their school community, or if a student is coming from secure detention back to school. It takes a lot of time and skill to do that. So we found that it was very difficult for schools to allocate the time to do that with everything else. So what we did is we established something that we're calling the Restorative Hub. Hub stands for Healing, Understanding, and Belonging, in which right now is housed in our Northwest Douglas campus on the 3rd floor. And you'll get an invitation for our open house in January. It is intentional space for staff and students for us to facilitate mediation and re-engagement meetings using not just our staff, but using our community partners to help us do that work. And also, many of you are familiar with our help zone supports. So making sure that our help zones in the schools are getting the training and the support that they need to be able to do that work back in their schools. So really working and training, working along with Center for Youth to help us with that initiative. Restorative conferencing training, we did maybe a month ago with Dr. Muhammad and his staff, where we had about 100 community partners trained with our Rock Restorative team to share a common understanding and language for mediation and re-engagement. And also, when we were meeting with the Rochester Regional Transit folks, I was surprised to hear that our students get banned from bus services, and it ranges for multiple infractions. And one of the things that I talked to them about is that, do you think this is something we can facilitate at the hub so that they won't be denied their bus services for 60 days, 30 days, if it's something that we can mediate and have a contract of understanding? And they have been really great. We brought them to the space, we showed them the space and what our thinking is. So we've worked in which they're sending us the referral. We're contacting families and students to invite them to sit down and work through a restorative conversation so they can get their bus privileges back. Also, targeted training for social workers who are supporting our new model for 812 classrooms. We've this year started where 812 classrooms get a 0.5 social worker just specifically for those students to help meet some of their academic and social emotional needs. So we're providing training and support for those social workers who are working with some of our highest needs students. Tier 3 is engagement from suspension training. 15 schools have been intentionally trained in the process and documentation to monitor suspension. Also, re-engagement process, as we've talked about that, our suspension data, we run it weekly and input it into each school's school engagement sheet to monitor and ensure re-engagement meetings are occurring with every student. Targeted intervention from the Center for Community Alternatives. As I said, we have some really wonderful partners who are really committed to working with us to help address this community need. And also monitoring of our long-term suspension and really looking at it to make sure that students who are recommended for long-term suspension aligns with our code of conduct, and then providing supports for those students so that they can return back to school successfully. As I said, we're working with community partners, mental health support, families, and just really understanding that this is going to need a community support and effort in order for us to meet the need of the whole child and our families. I'm going to show you a very quick video. As I mentioned, we had about 100 of our staff and community partners who attended a training, and we simply came together to talk about what is our re-engagement process so that we make sure that no matter who's facilitating these community re-engagements, which are a tier 3 situations, and we're going to talk about what is a referral to the hub and what is a school referral. And I just wanted to show you a quick video. It was a very powerful day. The superintendent and I had the privilege of addressing everyone and thanking them for the work and the commitment. Many of these community partners are also doing this work free of charge to the district. All right, so, and of course, restorative practice through a culturally responsive lens. Restorative practice belongs, right, to indigenous practice of also of those of African heritage. We often eat in circles, dance in circles, right, and discuss problems and celebration in circles. So reclaiming the power of that for the BIPOC population. So as I said, this whole day was very powerful, and the commitment of all involved to be a part of this work. So our restorative hub, healing, understanding, and belonging. So schools, anyone who has access to make these referrals. So we're doing restorative mediation for students, adults, families, and community. Restorative training for students, adults, and community, and so forth. And I know you can read for yourself, so they can use the link to access it, but it's also available in our Rock Connect as an icon, so that schools or any can make a referral for us to engage students and families in that restorative mediation that takes place at the Douglas campus. So here is a difference between what is an appropriate hub referral and what is a school-based support, whether it's at Tier 1, 2, or 3. Again, we are at the hub, we are addressing folks who have multiple offenses, ongoing issues that the schools have had the opportunity to resolve. Families are involved. We're doing a lot of work with community partners who are gang affiliated or involved. And long-term suspensions with serious harm. And as I mentioned, re-engagement meeting with RTS to repair harm and to reduce bus bans or the time period in which our students, thank you, are banned from the bus. I promise you I'm okay. I've just had this nagging cough for a couple of weeks. Here are some of, so far, this is about 2 weeks old, we've had about 60 referrals to the hub. As you can see, 31% of those are student-to-student mediation, 27 of them are family-to-family mediation, and I wish you can be a part of some of these. We've had one mediation that took us 4 hours, but it was worth every single 4 hour. We were able to see parents exchange numbers. We've had one incident where another parent helped another parent get a job. It's just been really powerful experiences that we've had. And also community building, teacher wellness, and as you can see for yourself, those are broken down in terms of the 60 restorative mediations that we facilitated as of November 28th. And again, this is just a process of how schools are able to request and get that support for themselves. And again, we talk about community partners, so Pathways to Peace, SNUG, Rise Up Rochester, Tribe 7, Untapped Ministries, Center for Community Alternatives, and I know I'm forgetting some, to the best of my memory, have been there devoting and dedicating their time to learn with us and to help us address some of the needs. We even have some community partners and the City of Rochester who's really interested in this initiative and looking at ways to offer it after hours and on the weekends in some of our community partners' locations. So we're looking to hopefully expand it to be City of Rochester wide and not just a district thing. We also have our mobile mental health folks, so if we know that something's of mental health related or concern, they're also invited to that space to provide resources and to work with families and students to address some mental health. We're also working right now we've had a community agency who's come to us who want to address substance education and substance abuse treatment, that they're willing to volunteer their time when there's a need for that at the hub. All right, I'll turn it over to the chairperson.
Thank you. I see someone chafing at the bit. Commissioner Malloy, I'll let you lead off, and then whoever signals next will go next.
Thank you. Dr. Turner, thank you so much for this presentation, and I really am excited to see the efforts that you and your team are making district-wide, the social and emotional supports of our students, especially our students who are most at risk. You know, kids can't learn if they're not in school, and so I really am delighted to see this plan, and I can't wait to see the academic outcomes for these students who are able to take advantage of these types of supports. So I'm really looking forward to see it play out so that we can come back with data later on and see how that has positively impacted our students. I believe in restorative practice, and I think that we can make it happen. I just want to emphasize, and this is more comment rather than a question, I just want to make sure, I do see on here that we offer wellness activities for our instructors, our teachers, or our paraprofessionals, our TAs, right? The kids who are or the people who are working with our students one-on-one. Want to make sure that our employees are given the supports they need beyond wellness, the supports that they need day in and day out to actually be effective as educators, so that they can help with the very nuanced needs of our students who are coming off of a long-term suspension or need extensive social emotional supports. And I think sometimes as educators, and I speak as a teacher here, we're sometimes ill-equipped to handle that, especially when a student comes back and there hasn't been a lot of communication. I just want to ensure that we're providing those supports to not only our teachers, but our paraprofessionals, our TAs, anyone who has daily contact and is teaching our students. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. That's super important. We're actually hosting our symposium January 20th, I believe, at the Douglas campus also, where we are talking about educator wellness, and it's not just yoga and stretching or whatever, getting a massage, which is really nice, but also this idea of educator resiliency and getting back to the core why we chose to be urban educators. So it's really important. It is pretty challenging with the schedules, as you can imagine, teachers and school keeps, but it is something that's really dear to my heart. I learned years ago when we first started this work, and I was making a huge demand on the system, primarily teachers and educators and leaders, to address student wellness and to help support students. And I had a teacher say in a PLC, Ruth, what about us? What do we do when our cup is empty? And it was a really aha moment, because I was so student focused, to say we also got to take care of the educators so they can do their job and take care of the students. And that's where this idea that we've done for years around educator resiliency and providing the PLC an opportunity for folks to come, not vent, but to really learn from each other and to recenter us back to our purpose as to why we chose to accept, the work as urban educators.
I see that Commissioner LeBron's hand is up, and then I'll go to the next person I see.
Yeah, and I'm having a coughing fit. I'm sorry. I just want to, one thing you didn't mention that I would just want to uplift is the fact that students also get to help participate in some of the mediations. And I only know that from personal experience and having to go to the center myself with my own child to help mediate a situation that was a tier 3. And I do think that this is innovative to remove some of these harder cases and harder situations for the schools to handle, for many reasons, right? Like they have things to do day to day, to then have to stop and mediate a much larger, more comprehensive issue. I just don't even think it's feasible. And that's how things sort of snowball and escalate and get worse without those supports. So I do want to uplift that. I do think this is innovative and amazing. And the fact that students who they themselves may have been caught up in some issues in the past have been trained in restorative practices to be that peer-to-peer support in a way that adults can't always get to kids, right? Like that they sometimes need that peer-to-peer, just like in any other area where there are peer supports, and it's more effective because they can relate to it and they're speaking the same language and the same lingo for the age. So I just want to uplift that because I thought it was pretty amazing. And the young lady that assisted in our situation was also amazing. And just to hear her own transition of struggling and sort of getting into fights in her freshman year to where she's at now, and all the opportunities that she has been given from going through restorative practices, but applying that even in her day-to-day life and not being involved in things outside of school. So just kudos to you and your team for that, seriously. And to the schools, I hope that they understand that they can utilize it and that the process moves for them. But again, kudos. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so far, we've been fortunate to have 4 of our recent graduates who are also our Rock Restorative trained students when they were in our high schools, get hired by some of our community agencies, and they are at the hub helping to facilitate some of this work. And it's just really amazing to see them come full circle and really appreciate the value of that and be able to share their own experiences, right? These are not necessarily honor roll students, right? And just to see them grow and flourish and contribute, right, to the betterment of our community.
Are there any other comments? Commissioner Simmons.
Yes, thank you. I love what you talked about regarding staff and I was thinking beyond wellness, the psychological safety in the workplace, because we know there's so many workplaces that really, really miss the mark with that. Also, just a couple of questions. On slide number 14, I saw that it was wonderful that a lot of the suspensions went down or decreased. I noticed the Ls went up, and wondering slightly, and wondering if we were able to attribute as to why that went up a little bit, or what we're seeing there.
Not necessarily, but that will certainly be something that we can, look into more in depth.
Okay, I'll commit that to the question log, so you all have an
Yeah.
opportunity for
So
that.
one of the things, just to add, I just thought about, one of the things that we are really struggling and looking at primarily with our L and students with disability is this idea of school disengagement. So being intentional about creating spaces when we talk about that are safe and welcoming and affirming for those particular students. So we'll break it down to see where they're occurring, and then try to get down to the root cause, what might be contributing to that.
Yes, thank you. And then my last question is around, again, the suspension. I love what I'm seeing there. And then I'm wondering, when we think about some of the alternative pieces we've implemented, like cool down rooms and things like that across school communities, how are we monitoring for that? Meaning, I'm trying to make sure I formulate this question properly. I guess that they're being used as they're intended to be used. We see a decrease in school suspensions, but someone may alternatively be like, go to the cool down room, and that's not what it was for. So
Yeah.
how are we monitoring for that?
Yeah, I think if you've, I know when we do board leadership and I sort of hear something, I keep a mental note. So even this Friday, which is our half day, we're bringing all the folks that are in the help zone and realigning that. In my absence, we create a manual. There were some things that kind of fell to the wayside. So making sure that we're very clear and that we are following across the board, right? How do we re-engage? So we're in a lot of the schools, and I've gotten to know folks who need that more professional development, because it is hard work, right? And that's the other thing I have to be mindful of. We didn't have to do this, right? We could have sort of sat comfortable and continued to do our coaching. It was really important to provide some meaningful support, not only to students, but also to our schools that were really struggling. So I have to be mindful of the team. When you do this hours on end, it's very taxing. So trying to provide professional development for them and to make sure that we're taking care of them as they do this hard work. So as I said, this Friday, we're bringing everybody together, making sure that we have those norms and structures of what help zones look like, what you should be doing, right? And getting back to those restorative questions and making sure that we're completing the loop and giving feedback to the teachers and schools as to what work is happening there.
Yeah, because I can imagine it's a human piece, and so there's one child who may need it 20 times in a month. I'm just talking, and there's a child who may only need it one time, and so it's not something you can truly measure for. But I also recognize that if we look at those schools, if we're collecting data or monitoring that, and we see a concentrated school where, hey, wait a minute, this is really being used a lot, and leaning into that would help us mitigate that. So I love what I'm seeing, and as Vice President LeBron mentioned, it's innovative and exciting to see what's going to come of this. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the exciting work of our program evaluation team is, and you guys were given that report a couple of weeks ago, months ago, is the ability to evaluate some of these services. And even previously, when we had an independent evaluator in the community in 2018 come and evaluate our restorative and help zone work, it still shows that it's very effective, right? It helps to show it. So we have the evidence even currently through our program evaluation to show that the intervention of the help zones are working in most of our schools.
Any other questions? Commissioner Elliott.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. So, Deputy Superintendent Turner, just in the overall unduplicated suspension rates, when we look at the demographics that are being suspended, is there something that we can learn from our Asian demographics? Since they have the lowest suspension rate, what is it that we can learn from that particular people group that will inform other people groups?
That's a very good question.
You know I got them.
Yeah, you do. So, I mean, if I had You know, one of the things that I've said for many, many years in our system is, and this is just the science of human behavior, implicit bias plays a lot in each of us day-to-day decision-making and how we respond. That population is very small compared to our African-American and Hispanic population. So I think really looking at, and we have overwhelming research that shows us who are those students we're expecting to have problems from. So therefore, sometimes becomes a self-fulfilled prophecy where we begin to see that. But I don't have the answer necessarily for you today, but I do know in the years of work and looking at which students get suspended, which one of students are kicked out of the classroom, implicit bias plays a huge role in that, and it is just an unconscious response that many of us, sometimes irregardless of our racial background, that have been socially conditioned to respond in that way. And that's some work that we began before and that we're beginning to address again, especially in our PLCs with our educators and school leaders.
So with that, the fact that we're reducing the number of students that we are suspending out of school, that means that they're more in the classrooms, they're in the buildings, let me just put it that way. And so the question is, how much more training will teachers and other staff have in order to be able to ensure that the classroom is managed, that we're addressing the needs of our students, and that they're actually learning, that we have quieted the tension and the conduct that's going on in those schools now that we're not, you know, I don't know if we've gotten appeal. We may have an appeal to the board this year. I don't know if we've gotten one, and man, I could tell you, I remember when they were coming to us for approval. So how are we, and then I will just also add this, is the funding that we're using to provide this kind of funding a part of the COVID dollars? And then if so, when the COVID dollars are removed, how do we continue this kind of work, or do we?
So let me, I wanted to talk
I know it's
to
a
the-
lot.
No, I want to talk to the latter part.
Okay.
So I wanted to go back to pre-pandemic, right? We were still better pre-pandemic than we have been post-pandemic.
Okay.
You remember that's a lot of work that we did, the implementation of our help zones, which was pre-pandemic commitment that the board made. So I'm confident, right? I'm a firm believer that if I have 20 quality folks, I can do a lot better than I have 5, right? But again, it's not the bodies, it's the quality of it. So I'm confident that if we keep our commitment to what was already established pre-pandemic, which is our commitment to restorative practice, our help zones, our social emotional supports with our partners, and some of the grant funding for our mental health services, I'm confident we'll be okay. Our school chiefs and our Department of Teaching and Learning is doing a great job of really spending time with principals, what to look for, providing the coaching that is necessary, right? And how to support teachers and classrooms and what to look for along with our administration and support staff. So we're spending a lot of time in the schools, right? Not only pointing out what's not working, but really being a support and a thought partner with our schools. So through that, we're going to see outcome. We've have a lot of new leaders, right, over the years that we're really going to have to bring up to par in terms of what does that look like for teaching and learning. So I'm confident in that work that we're doing collectively as an administration. Again, I know we don't want to hear this. Change does take time, and it takes consistency. And I think I feel like that's a commitment that we're making as a district.
Thank you.
I'm just going to give everyone a first chance before I go around again. Commissioner Patterson?
Yes, just to piggyback, or not to piggyback, but to respond to the president's, she had a question, why are Asians doing so much better than our people? And statistically, it'll tell you that it's number one, family support, both social and emotional support by the family. Asians tend to have a home where the father and the mother are there and education is a priority for them. Whereas we have broken homes, we have pockets of poverty, we have a lot of emotional, social ills that our kids go through. They're exposed to violent crime. So there's a number of reasons why we don't see the number of Asians acting out in the same way that we see our people acting out. And those are just some of the reasons that I mentioned. But primarily, it's the home. Everything goes back to the home. And no one wants to really say that openly. But there's something to be said about having both parents. Not that I'm taking anything away from single parents or mothers. I'm not, because they have a very difficult task to not only be the mother, but be strong and like a father that's missing. So I respect that, and I don't take anything from that. But we have to be honest with ourselves and say what the difference is. You know, whether you're white, black, or yellow. It's very important to be able to be raised with both parents in the home. And academically, statistically, it shows and it's proven that those students do better with both parents in the home.
So if I can just add
can
to
I
that, is I just, so whenever we look at community violence, right, whether it's present, past, it's tied to concentrated poverty. So wherever there's been communities in concentrated poverty, there has been community violence, whether it's Italian community, Polish, Irish, African American, Asians. So I want to add that. And I also want to add that studies have shown that African American fathers are just as involved, if not more involved, than their other racial counterparts. So I want to share both sides of the narrative. The myth that there's more African American men in jail than in college is a myth. It's not actually the fact. So we also have to take into account systemic racism and how some racial groups are portrayed, and that the whole story is not necessarily told. Do I see a value in a two-parent household? I grew up in a two-parent household. But also the same could be told that you could have physical two-parent household and somebody be completely disconnected and unavailable, which is just as damaging as an absent parent.
Okay, I know that this conversation got people kind of excited, but I want to make sure everybody got a first chance, including myself. Commissioner Adams?
So I just want to say, hats off to you, Ruth. Good response. I grew up in a two-family household, and I fell through the crack. Redemption is real, though, but I fell through the crack. So there ain't no, this is a tough conversation that we're going off into, and there's a lot of stuff that are myths. They're just not true. If you go to these schools, man, I'm telling you, man, it's just as many men walking their kids to school as it is women. We showing up. We are showing up. They just highlight the few of us that don't show up. So we have to be careful when we start talking about what's a fact and what ain't a fact, man. We got some brothers out here, man, doing their thing, man. They just for real, man. and we need to start highlighting them. Just like we got a lot of students, man, that's doing their thing, man. They ain't getting no props. We need to do a better job at highlighting what they do. And the incoming commissioner, Santiago had already shared a good idea with me about that. So I'm like really hopeful, but I love your response. Thank you.
Do you want to respond, Commissioner?
I have a rebuttal. I have a
No,
response.
hold on. Not everyone has had the first turn, so he did ask that, Ruth, I just completely blanked on your name, to respond, so I'm giving you that opportunity before I ask my own question.
I'm not clear what I'm responding to.
Okay.
I think I said enough.
That's fine. That's fine. So my question is it's going to drift away from this.
Well, can we respond to?
Everyone gets a chance, and then we'll go
Okay.
around one more time,
All
because
right.
Commissioner Simmons came before you, and I know you're all reacting, so you'll have time to think about what your question is, or your comment is. Ruth, my question was, I know that the suspension rates are higher than pre-COVID. And I know a lot of new dollars went into this and new hires for restorative justice and restorative practices. But we also only just updated our code of conduct. So my question is, how much of the reduction year over year do you attribute, and especially going into this year, year to date, do you attribute to revised code of conduct versus more focus on restorative practices versus support directly to teachers and principals, or all of the above, or none of the above?
I would say all of the above. I really do. I think they work in concert together and are interconnected and very much needed. As you know, even our initial revision to the Code of Conduct, right, which was a huge movement for us, along with our adoption of restorative practice, I believe is what helped in the coming years to contribute to the decrease in our suspension rate.
Thank you. Okay, I know at least 3 people want to add to the conversation. Commissioner Simmons, then Commissioner Elliott, then Commissioner Patterson.
Yes.
Oh, and
Ma-
Commissioner
Madam
Malloy
Chair.
is on the end of that, too. Okay.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to allow President Elliott, and then I would go after her, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, because I wanted to respond to Commissioner Patterson, his statement. The statement is too simplistic, first of all. You cannot just look at what television may say. There are some deep-rooted issues when it comes to the differences with other people's group. No other group has been targeted the way the Black family has been targeted, the way the Black community has been targeted. There is intentionally been drugs been placed into the community. It is intentionally put in our community where there is bad food in our community. It is interesting how other groups can come in our community and develop businesses, and we're not allowed to do that. So there are a lot of reasons why there is intentionality of having a prison system that most of them are Black men in that prison system. There is documented evidence of the fact that this was intentionally done in our community. And so just to have a simplistic statement to say that Black fathers are not at home and we don't do what Asian families do, and while I wanted to be very elegant about and sensitive about the statement that I made, because I know we've got some issues in our community, but I did not want it to come across that we were being insensitive to the issues that our community is going through. Now, we've only been free for about 60 years. And you're talking about 400 years in slavery and Jim Crow and the other issues. It's going to take us time, and we will get there. Martin Luther King prophesied that we will see the land of the living. We would get to the promised land, but we're still moving into that direction in which we've got some issues, but we've got to uplift every family regardless of the circumstance that they're in. I'm in these communities all the time, and I know how hard these families work. And I do see, to Commissioner Adams' point, Black men are in these schools all the time. And so it may not be the same kind of family configuration that others have, but they are working it out. In many regards, Black men can't be in the homes if if the mother is receiving welfare. Why do they do that? See, we got to look at it from a systemic perspective. And so there is this attempt to get the Black male out of the home in order for the family to survive economically. So don't just make the statement, this blanket statement that, the fathers are not in the home and these negative kinds of statements. We've got to have some sensitivity about where we are as a people and then move forward from there. So I wanted to add that to it because I didn't want just the conversation, Commissioner Patter, those statements that you've just made to lay on the floor without it being challenged. They must be challenged. We are moving in the right direction. Our kids want to learn. They can't. They are the product of an environment that they're trying to get themselves out of. So let's be more sensitive to what we are when it comes to our community and less critical, because we're going to be moving up into that direction. It's hard work, but we're going to get there. Thank you, Commissioner Powell.
Okay. Commissioner Simmons was next. Now, keep in mind, I really don't want this to go more than this second round, so let's put whatever you want to say on the table now, or forever hold your peace, okay?
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you for that. So I wanted to acknowledge, there, as a Black woman, there are some things we do have to look at within our community, but I do want to uplift the statements that you made and thank you for that, because we do have to be very careful about the narrative, the broad, as President Elliott said, scoping narrative and generalizations about who we are as a people. So I love that you are in tune, because everybody, well, I'm going to say it, everybody of color ain't your kind, and it's important that we know who we are. The other piece is, my question is around, you spoke about incarcerated youth and long-term suspended youth and having a plan to bring them back in, and wondering if the students that we see that have chronic absenteeism records, if you will, if we are using those same measures to make sure they're acclimated when they do show up for school, as we continue to work to get them there. Are they?
Yes, we are, and I think Carly might have mentioned it when she did her attendance. So we're also working with our parent liaison, homeschool liaisons, our attendance department, all those folks who touch that, families in transition, to make sure, again, we're all trained in that same process of support, and that we're speaking the same language, and that we're also allowing our scholars to tell us what they need in terms of supports. Oftentimes, we think one way of supporting students is the best way, but allowing them to be a part of the plan to say what kind of supports that they need. And it's heartbreaking sometimes to hear, like, I just want folks to give me a chance, right? Don't throw my past at me, right? I want people to say my name, greet me, and don't say, are you gonna do that again? Very simple things that we have to be able to listen to and then be able to incorporate, right? So that folks feel like they're having a fresh start when they're coming, that their past is not always following them.
Yeah, and this is my last thing, is similar to what Commissioner Adams said. I do want to uplift incoming Commissioner-elect Santiago. I know he's in his wheelhouse right now listening to this presentation. I mean, prior to him even running for office as a student, he was coming to us talking about curriculum for mental health, trying to get that information in the school. He's been a pioneer in the community working for that. So I'm glad he's here for this particular presentation, and I can't wait to see what happens as he comes on. You've been a loud and very present voice.
Okay. Commissioner Patterson?
Yes, when I speak to the audience, when I speak to the community, I speak relative to facts, data. I volunteer out at the Monroe County Children's Detention Center. I'm out there once a week, every week. And 90-some%, we're just starting to keep statistics on it now, of those young men who are students in the Rochester City School District that are committing some of our heinous crimes. I mentor and role model them out there. And one of the questions I ask them is, how many of you had a man in the home, a father in the home, or anyone, a male in the home, to raise you? And if you did, were they a quality father? Were they around? 90-some% indicate that they didn't have a male role model in the home. So when I speak, I'm speaking of Monroe County and what I know here. I'm not speaking of any other state or any other county. I'm speaking of our city and what I know and those kids who I talk to. So I think it's very important that I understand everything my colleagues said here. I understand the struggles that we have as people of color. I do. But when 90-some% of the kids out there, male and female, are indicating there is no male in the home, that's very telling. So thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Malloy.
Dr. Turner, thank you again for your wonderful presentation. And I want to compliment Commissioner Adams for his comments. But thank you for providing clarity and providing accuracy in your statistics and the data that you've shared. And I think there's a lot of importance of not making sweeping generalizations about anyone in our community or harboring any type of stereotype. But I respect the data that you've presented us, and thank you for providing us with that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Turner.
Thank you.
If we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, on 4B, new business policy status presentation. Charisma?
I still have the suspension appeal.
I'm sorry?
I still have the suspension appeal data for the board from 4A. Two attachments. Do you want me to?
4B.
No, for 4A, there's still another
Oh,
presentation.
there's another presentation. I beg your pardon, there was a lot of echo, I couldn't really make out what you were saying. Okay, all right, who's presenting this one?
I'm doing it.
Okay, very good.
All right. I'm trying to make this as quick as possible. Good evening. Before I get started, I just wanted to remind everyone, based off of Deputy Turner's presentation, that what you're about to review does not indicate that a particular school or demographic has more or less suspensions. I would recommend referring to Deputy Turner's presentation with that data. So this slide just shows the process when it comes to board appeals. So families have 30 days to appeal to the board once the superintendent provides the letter regarding the suspension decision. And then the board will review the suspension appeal within 30 school days. And then they will render a decision, and if the family disagrees with the decision, they can appeal to the Commission of Education within 30 days. For the 22-23 school year, the board received and reviewed 23 suspension appeals, upholding 74% of the appeals. The number of long-term suspensions received for the 22-23 school year decreased by 31%. From the long-term suspension appeals received during the 21-22 school year. This slide displays the number of long-term suspension appeals received by schools during the 21-22 school year versus 22-23. Schools with only one color bar mean that no appeals were submitted for the school year that the bar color is missing for. For this slide on gender, the first student demographic data we will review is gender, and so you'll notice that the gender demographics switched. So for the 21-22 school year, our students who identify as female submitted the most appeals, which as for the 22-23 school year, our students who identify as male submitted the most appeals. Regarding grade level data for 21-22 versus 22-23, the appeals received were highest during the 21-22 school year for 9th and 10th graders, whereas for the 22-23 school year, appeals received were highest for 9th and 11th graders. In addition, for the 21-22 school year, grade 7 was the lowest grade level that appeals were received, and grade 12 was the highest. Whereas 22-23, grade 5 was the lowest and grade 11 was the highest. And for both years, consistently, there was no suspension appeals received for 6th graders. With age, for the 21-22 school year, the highest received were for ages 15 to 16, whereas for the 22-23 school year, the highest received were for ages 14 and 16. And then for race, so when analyzing the race data for both the 21-22 and 22-23 school years, appeals were received the most for students who identify as Black. Also, out of the 3 races identified, no appeals were received for students who identify as white for the 22-23 school year. For students with disabilities, for both the 21 and 22 school year and 22 and 23 school years, appeals received were mainly from our general education students. So this slide shows these are the 15 conduct areas that represents the behaviors students were disciplined for during the 21-22 school years and 22-23 school years. Consistent with both years, attack on student, fighting, and inciting or participating in a disturbance were the areas in which the most appeals were received. So if you use the key at the bottom of this slide, you will understand basically, you know, which is for which year, but the purple indicates for both years. And then this slide shows the discrepancies for the 22-23 school year. So the Code of Conduct Policy 1400 outlines the level of disciplinary response students receive based on the behavior displayed. School leaders can recommend a student to be long-term suspended for a level 4, which is a long-term suspension, and submit paperwork to support the recommendation to the long-term suspension office with final decision from the superintendent. When a student appeals a long-term suspension to the board receives all materials regarding the suspension, including the long-term suspension packet that includes documents from the school long-term suspension office and superintendent, and long-term hearing recordings. The data you're reviewing shows the discrepancies that were found in the long-term suspension material submitted to the board. Altogether, 16 out of the 23 long-term suspension appeals received had discrepancies. Of those discrepancies, at least one long-term suspension appeal had more than one discrepancy. However, around the third quarter of the school year, discrepancies lessened, especially from schools who had submitted repeated appeals, which shows that administration was working internally to ensure that the discrepancies went away.
Thank you so much, Charisma.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions, and then we'll give the floor back to you for the next portion, right? And Commissioner Patterson has a question.
Screen 10, and I might be missing it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but when it talks about these incidents, where's the number of incidents? You know, from year to year, a comparison from 21, 22, 22, 23. There's no numbers like the attack on student, for example. Where are the numbers for the disrespectful behavior? Where are the numbers for the drugs or controlled substances? I think as commissioners, that's very important that, you know, we have the numbers, we have the data, we have the statistics.
So I think this was just to give an idea of the range of violations. We do have we have all heard the suspension appeals, so whether it was, I mean, granted, we didn't have it collated like this, but I think the goal of the slide was just to show you the range of different things kids that were filing appeals were being charged with. And this only reflects those who appealed, does not reflect all suspensions. So it would not be very telling to only show, or to show you the counts of each one, because it only represents those where the students or their parents chose to appeal.
Okay. At some point in time, maybe the superintendent, is there going to be some type of report that's out with those numbers at some point in time?
We could pull incident reports by suspension types and stuff, and I think just what Commissioner Powers is saying is what I was going to say. This doesn't demonstrate that these are the highest or least number of suspension areas. It just shows who was suspended and then for what and what they ended up appealing for. So yes, we can get those numbers.
Yeah, so in the future, we'll have numbers on these
But that
highlighted areas as far as,
For all suspensions.
Yes, for all suspensions, we can give you a breakdown of what all suspensions are. I just want to remind you that these are just long-term suspensions that were appealed and brought to the Board of Education, right? You know, so we could give you a summary of all the suspensions and what was the criteria they fell under, absolutely. But it won't, the numbers on this won't be for, right, it's not going to be helpful. This is just appeals at this time.
Right, and like I said, I'm not looking for anything in depth, but just numbers, statistics. Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner LeBron, any questions? Okay. Oh, no? Okay. All right, Charisma, you want to take us to the next portion of the agenda? This would be the policy status presentation.
Give me 1 second, I just gotta pull that up, okay. All right, so policy status. So before so this is gonna give an overview of the 2023 policy manual review that we have just completed. So before the 2020-2023 policy manual review started, there were 164 policies that the board had adopted, and now we are at 170 policies. So here's a breakdown of the policies in the policy manual currently. So during the 2020-2023 policy manual review process, the board adopted 24 new policies, amended 146 policies, and rescinded 18 policies. Out of the 170 policies in the manual that totals, 49 policies are required. NESBA, a New York State School Board Association, has 50 required policies listed. The reason why our required policy numbers are not the same as the required policies by NESBA is because our manual have some policies that are in multiple policies. So like our sped ed policies, for example, NESBA, let's say, may have like 8 sped ed policies, but then we've broken it down in our policy manual with just like 4 policies, for example. In addition to policies in the manual, there are currently 17 exhibits and 45 superintendent regulations. So as a reminder, the next policy manual review is slated for 4 years. So the first time we did 3 years, and this time around we're looking at 4 years to go from 2023 to 2027. Starting in 2024, policy committee meetings will be every other month during the even number months. So the next policy committee meeting wouldn't be until February 6th. So there are some new updates to the policy website that I wanted commissioners, administration, and viewing audience to be aware of if you haven't seen it yet. So typically the policy manual can be accessed by clicking the policies tab in board docs or by clicking the board policies tab under our district website for Board of Education. However, now you can type rcsdk12.org/policy and it'll take you directly to our policy website. When reviewing the website, you'll also notice a disclaimer that says that basically the policies are being translated and they are posted as available. And so our policies are actually are currently being translated to our other 4 top languages in the district. So altogether we'll have our 5 top languages. And this is just a snapshot, which you're seeing on your screen now, as to what the policy website will look like, is looking like, I should say. Arabic is the one that's missing right now, but we again are in the process of translating all policies to have our top 5 languages. I also want to take this time to just thank our communications department, specifically recognize our translators. They've been so awesome and how quickly they've been able to translate their policies to get this completed. So just wanted to recognize our translators. And my last slide. So the 2023-2027 policy manual review has started as of November. The policy manual review calendar can be found online on if you go to our Board of Education tab for our policy committee, the calendar has been uploaded there. We've also shared it with our advisory groups so that they are aware of the calendar as well, because the policies do go to them. And it also has been shared with the chief of staff, so that administration is also aware of the calendar. And so, thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, I see Commissioner Malloy has a question.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, and I appreciate the work that you and your team have done on this as part of the policy committee, and what is a very time-consuming process, so kudos and thank you. One thing I'm really curious about is how our policy manual compares to other Big Five school districts, and if there's a way that commissioners could be provided with a breakdown of what our manual looks like in comparison to Buffalo or Syracuse or Schenectady. It's my understanding that some districts have a policy manual that's really half the size of ours. And as we move as commissioners to adopt a new governance model in the next year, I think we really have to start looking at the addition of even more policies and the impact that that might have. I just want to see those comparisons as we move forward as a board. Thank you.
So keep in mind that we use the NSBA's model, but other districts use the BOCES model, which if well, you weren't around when we explored the possibility of transitioning to using Erie County BOCES, and they had quite a different philosophy about our a policy manual, and I think at the time the board was really just not interested in making that radical a change. Your mileage may vary. It's up to you guys what you do going forward.
Yeah, I just think it might be a valuable discussion to have as a board to make those types of decisions about what type of manual we'd want moving forward and what might be best for our student outcomes. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody, Commissioner Simmons?
Yes, kudos, and the communication, you mean to tell me that our communications department translated 170 policies this year? All of them were translated?
Well, they're working on it. Go.
They're working on it.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
they're
a
working on
huge feat, so wow. Lift, thank you, that's a better term. And then I just wanted to make sure I heard you properly. You were saying that the number of policies we have in comparison to something like a NSBA would be because you said some of our topics, if you will, are broken into parts. Some of our policies are broken into multiple parts, or what
So it's just the required ones I was talking about. So NSBA, when they send us over at their policy manual, they send us both the recommended and required policies. So what I was talking about is just specific to the required policies. So like our wellness policy is a good example. It has 2 policies, whereas NSBA would have had 2 separate policies. And that's why our numbers are just 1 lower because of that.
Can this question be towards, like, can I ask this? If you can't answer it, just let me know. What is the biggest barrier to the policy with all these different policies that you're finding? What would you say in your experience has been your biggest barrier?
Is your question, why was it so hard to get through a manual review? Is that?
No, what is your largest barrier? How do I, we go through this, and that's intensive labor by itself, but like there's barriers to getting them.
Well, let me describe it in historical terms. The biggest barrier prior to Charisma, yeah, I'll elevate her to Commissioner. Prior to Rahima and Charisma, it was really getting the administration to actively participate with our staff to conclude the review process. It's a little bit like, I grew up in my professional life in total quality management, so I know it's outdated. There's a bunch of other things they use now instead of that, but the concept was the compliance with the corporate culture had to be top down, right? And if you had middle managers that didn't support it, essentially they kind of passive aggressive, and just dragged their feet and didn't come prepared to meetings and so on. I can tell you that in the time that we've been overhauling this, in the 3 years we've been doing this, we haven't seen, and if there were instances of foot dragging, Charisma cut it off before it ever had a chance to be obvious to anybody else. She's that good. The other thing is the fact that we had the state monitor and the mandate that came from the state monitor. I mean, nobody's going to blow off, everybody might blow off the policy chair and the staff that supports her, but no one's going to blow off the state monitor. Does that kind of get to the core of your message? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. We're ready to move on then, huh? Okay. The required guidelines for advisory group reports. Charisma, this is you as well.
So what you see in front of you right now is hoping to create an exhibit, 2300E1. Currently, the board bylaws talk about call-out advisory groups, allowing them to make reports, but there is no guidelines in terms of what those reports, should look like. And so this exhibit is just to help our advisory groups, especially when there's turnover in our advisory groups, just so they understand, what the board expectations are. And so, of course, if you have any feedback, let me know, and I can, make whatever edits are needed.
Keep in mind, any exhibit in our policy manual doesn't require board vote. If you have any objection to what's here in the exhibit, take it up with your next policy chair. Okay? Okay? Thank you. All right. That brings us to, I think, is our last agenda item. Am I right about that? Yeah. Okay. So there was every reason to believe we were going to have this discussion about Policy 2300 again, because General Counsel had raised a couple of concerns after the policy left committee, that he wanted to make sure that we were attuned to one way or another. And then, of course, Commissioner Adams suggested that we needed to do a go slow on this and give the new board members an opportunity to weigh in. Now, so tonight's objective is just to go through the sections where our general counsel offered an alternative to what we actually passed. Once we've been through that, we don't have to advance it back to the board immediately, okay? That can sit on the policy committee agenda for another month and give our commissioners-elect, well, another 2 months, because we're not meeting in January, but that would give our commissioners-elect another opportunity to weigh in at the policy committee level, if that's what the will of this body. But first and foremost, I want to make sure that we really had a chance to hash out the language of the new paragraphs that they were already approved by the policy committee. So this is a fresh look and an opportunity to reconsider, okay? The first paragraph, oops, I got the wrong, sorry, I'm not, I'm looking for the, yeah, okay. So the first section that our legal counsel has offered up alternative language for, Charisma, can you tell me precisely what section of the, I think it's on page 6. It's under the heading Leadership Resignations and Recalls. The history of this was that the board had asked Anissa Wheeler to come up with some language. That was the basis for this. I offered some suggestions of my own, and this is what we ended up with. I left a third column on each PowerPoint slide in the event that what we want to do is, rather than choose A or B, we might take bits and pieces from both. So rather than read it, I'm just going to be quiet for a minute, let everybody read both of the alternatives and weigh in with their opinions. Again, the proposed version would be as proposed by our legal counsel.
So let me just ask Commissioner Powell, there language that there was language that you proposed, but then language that is proposed by our general counsel? Okay, so where is that language?
Middle column is what the
Oh, on that PowerPoint?
On the
Okay.
PowerPoint is what general counsel is proposing. I think it's tighter language, it's more precise. General counsel and I often talk about the fluency of the written language, and I think he did a better job than what was there before.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Powell. Yes, just to kind of reiterate, there was some changes proposed by Commissioner Powell. Some of the language I had some concerns with, so this is a second pass. Ultimately, I think it's important that this is the board's language and decision because there are some mechanisms included here for potential removal from a meeting and election of a chair pro temp. So I think the board should really absorb and be comfortable with this mechanism of self-government and understand what it means.
Okay, so we'll just have a free flow of discussion, but eventually I'm going to ask each board member to choose A, B, or propose a change of language for column C. So Commissioner Elliott first?
So I'm looking at, I'm not sure which slide this is.
We're going to walk through one slide at a time?
Okay.
That way we
So
can
we're on
stay-
the first slide?
We're just on the first slide.
Okay,
That way we
all
can
right.
stay focused.
Thank
and
you.
I'll make sure we're all
Okay.
talking about the same thing. Commissioner Adams, do you have an opinion on which of these?
No, I didn't have my hand up. I didn't have my hand up.
No, I'm just, we're going to just like A, B, or something else.
So, there's a lot of things that have to take into consideration here. Because a few years ago, they had different committees, and there was committees of 3 people. And I recall on that one committee, man, that you had chose to remove President Elliott from that committee, you and Tom Brennan, and then you changed the vote up. I just think that it was. I never forget it. I was at that because I used to go to a lot of committee stuff. I'm just concerned with if we change anything, that we need to make sure that we take another look at these type of policies here. Because when you are in a committee of 3 instead of committee of the whole, it's a whole new ball game. So I'm just really concerned about this. And in my experience with, to be honest, man, the chaos, the chaos. I don't know. I'm going to pass on this myself.
Okay.
But Commissioner Malloy or something.
Thanks. I can't speak to, I have general statements about all of these changes, not specific ones. Do you want us to focus one at a time, and will we have an opportunity to just talk in general?
I think after if there's, my objective here is to like make a choice. or fine tune the language, but then there's another step. After we get through all of them, there's the next step of where do we go from here?
Yeah, I'm not interested in fine tuning the language of any
Okay.
of these policies or
Can you-
aspects of this policy, but I'm happy to make a comment in general about why later, if time permits.
So in the absence of a more specific response, what already cleared the committee is option one.
I think we need to look at a new governance structure, and when we consider a new governance structure, as a board, we'll be perhaps re-looking at or looking again at our committee structures in general. So I would really hate to pass any policies that bind us to our current committee structures without allowing new board members especially to look at how our committees are structured right now. I have major reservations, and I think that we need to explore, for all of these suggestions, I think we need to explore the potential long-term impact of any of this wording and then potential scenarios that could arise from this type of wording. I think, and these are my personal opinions, but I feel that there is a potential for abuse using this type of language. I'm interested in understanding the origins, and I'd love our new commissioners to have the opportunity to understand the origins and history about these changes that are being proposed. I think these are decisions that could have potentially big changes, and I think that this needs to be part of looking at our overall decision-making as a board in general, our governance structure. We have to think about who benefits from this type of policy. And I think that, as Commissioner Adams alluded to, the potential for distractions or chaos could potentially increase by changing these policies. I really think that as a board, we've worked hard to repair relationships between various commissioners, and I think that the wording in this way or making such changes could potentially undermine the hard work that we have done to increase and improve relationships. And I think that this also has the potential to be undemocratic, because I think that it can arbitrarily silence minority voices on this democratic governing body. So I think that it also has the potential to result in a board of buddies helping buddies behind the scenes, or a system of patronage behind the scenes, which might be potentially board members working illegally with district employees to make decisions without the full discussion of other board members. I'm just saying these are the potential concerns that I have. And I think that this type of wording and these proposed changes are unnecessary, because we already have the mechanisms or means to express dissatisfaction with board members. I think that we have an annual meeting where we can remove people and replace people on different committees. So again, I think that we're disrupting our current policy. I think it takes away from our focus as a student outcome-focused leadership group. We should be focusing on our student academic outcomes. And, outcomes are measures of what students know or are able to do. And when we get away from that as a board, we end up having disagreements. I feel like this policy change or these potential changes could disrupt our ability to effectively supervise our superintendent as well. So those are just my thoughts in general. I would really prefer that we wait to have these discussions until our February policy meeting, when we have our new board members.
So are you passing?
I am passing. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll keep my comments brief. The language does seem a little tricky to me. Also, I would say it seems more adult-focused than student-centered. And my option would be lane 3, and that would be, the language I would use for lane 3 is wait until 2024.
Commissioner Elliott.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. So let me just also put some real stuff on the table. These policies, even this language in this discussion came up because of some misbehavior of board members. Let's not forget that. That's why we're here. And so while there may be, we may be moving in the right direction, and I really do appreciate that, human behavior being as it is, we may have to put these kinds of, or something similar to this, in place to prevent misbehavior in the future. So I do support that we have some kind of language in there. I'm willing to wait, but human behavior as it is, and we know some of the human behavior that this board has experienced in the past. And it just behooves us to make sure that we are protecting ourselves. Everybody is elected board member. We can't really, have anybody to be dismissed from the board, but there has been proven on this board, there's been some misbehaviors and some ethical issues that have been going on. And so the concern is what does the board have as recourse? Because I'll tell you, there have been conversations in the community to say, well, what are you all doing about it? Well, we can't do anything about it, per se. But this may be an opportunity for us to really consider if we got, board members in the future. And not only with this board or this board elect, but future boards. So I think that this board has to protect itself and do have some language in here. I'm not saying that this may be the language, but I would not want to have some language in here that protects this board from misbehavior from other, from what personal behaviors or professional behaviors or behaviors from this board may do, and this board is vulnerable. That's my concern. Thank you, Commissioner Powell.
Okay, so you're,
Oh, so I'm whatever the will of the board is, I'm fine with this. I don't have a problem with delaying it, but know what I'm saying. For me, it has to be some kind of parameters that are protecting this board. Thank you.
okay. Before I go to Commissioner Patterson and Commissioner LeBron, I want to clarify. This slide is about how a mechanism by which board members can let other board members know they seek to resign from a committee. It doesn't even, it's later paragraphs that get into accountability. This is about when a commissioner chooses to resign.
Okay.
Now, as Commissioner Miller has mentioned past, I've lived through at least 2 occasions where board members resigned from their committee chairs. If you remember, Commissioner Williams resigned from chairing the Finance Committee, and then Commissioner Shepard resigned from chairing a committee. Which put a burden on other board members, but that's not even the point of this particular paragraph. This is just offering up a way in which that provides for that kind of structure or discipline by which a member of the board can resign from a position.
But so, let me just ask this clarifying question. In that case, though, if you have at least 4 members who may be interested in delaying this, do we need to have this discussion at this point?
Well, I'm going to go through the slides.
Okay.
And if the answer is wait on every slide, and I don't understand in this particular instance why you would need to wait, because this particular one is not grounded in our past so much as providing a system for going forward.
So can I ask a question, Commissioner Powell, of the General Counsel about what's the difference between both versions? And why are you proposing this version versus the version from the committee?
I think the version from the committee was a little broad in scope. What I tried to do was put in a few more guardrails, so for example, in C.
No, we're still talking about A.
Oh, we're
just
going
talking about
letter
A.
by letter.
Yeah, and I noticed yours is a little bit more concise, but I don't know that there's any other difference.
A really talks about resignation.
He's talking about
I
this.
think I struck the language that says absent a resignation date will be effective at the next board meeting, really to emphasize that the board needs a president. And it's really to emphasize that it is, there's really one position required, by the board as a body. The president is required in education law, and a vice president is optional, and obviously the district chooses have a vice president. So as it pertains to A, I don't have much issue with A. It just reiterates that the way that a committee chair or the vice president may resign, and as well as the president, like anyone on the board can resign. There are mechanisms for how that happens, and I just try to tighten up the language a little bit.
In particular, Commissioner Elliott, the version we had didn't really speak to what happens after a board, should a president resign from that role. Legal counsel's version is explicit about, drawing attention to the fact that we need to make a new election as early as possible. That's the biggest difference, and that's why I would support it.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Patterson?
Yeah, I'm going to be just transparent about myself. I am exhausted at this point. I think this section 2300 is very important, that we do our due diligence in making a decision. Maybe not tonight, but I'm in agreement with some of the things my colleagues, have indicated. And there's no reason for me to be repetitious. But one thing I will say is that there's a distrust amongst members, on this board. I'm not saying all members, and I don't want to name any names because it's very few. But they operate on fear and intimidation, and that shouldn't be. So when we look at things like this and we're reviewing things like this, my antenna goes up. What's the reason for these changes? I'm reading column A, and right here it reads fine to me, the circulated version from Policy Committee. And then I looked at the proposed version. I'm like, oh, okay, why are these changes being made? And what is the purpose of those changes? And I understand, Commissioner Powell, what you're saying. But overall, it makes me question. And when I question, I like to spend time diving into information in an effort to determine why. And I can't do that here tonight. Part of it is because I'm really tired, I'm just being honest, and I'm losing my focus. So I can't really vote on anything when I'm losing that focus. Do I like column A? If I had to choose right now, circulated version from Policy Committee, yes, opposed to the proposed version, because I question why. And I've heard the General Counsel and what he said, and his response, I should say. But I think a lot of this should be returned to committee, and we should be allowed to really review it and speak to one another, talk to one another before we make a decision.
Okay, all done?
Yes.
Commissioner LeBron, do you have anything to contribute?
Yeah, I also pulled up Robert's rules because there is already a method to remove a chairperson in a meeting.
I'm sorry, I got to
based-
stop you, Commissioner LeBron. We're not talking about the removal paragraph. And that seems to be the problem, is folks so far have not focused on what's in front of us. What's in front of us,
The whole policy is in front of me, so I just want to put that out there. You're breaking it up because you want to talk about it sentence by sentence and drag the meeting. I don't have a problem with the language in this one. I do agree with President Elliott's statements that we do have to have some parameters. Um, Personally, this issue has come up with more than one board member. And, I hate the notion of like throwing it out there because you sit on the dais and you pretend that you are neutral or a mellow person, but in reality, you go out and do things that are bullying and intimidating tactics, especially to our staff, because they're the ones who have to endure it, unfortunately, by certain commissioners. Um, so all I'm gonna say is I don't think we're gonna get that much from the two oncoming commissioners because in the first 30, 60 days that they're joining, they're not gonna know enough to give, in my opinion, meaningful feedback and having the experience of having served for more than 30 to 60 days. But I still want to hold off on the whole conversation for the bylaw changes so that they can be made with the two new incoming individuals. But Robert's rules actually has parameters already in place for a lot of these conversations, whether they're in the bylaws or not. There is a method. I do want to point out though that we do, and I'm not going to be talking when you go into the other points. I'm done for the night. But I do want to point out that there does have to be some parameters to remove a chairperson, point blank, period, because we've already experienced that on more than one occasion, unfortunately. That's all.
Okay, would either of our commissioners-elect like to speak on this topic? Well, wait till you get to the mic, so,
I'll just say briefly, as an oncoming board member, I think I have the intelligence to go through and verify what is necessary for me and the outcomes in the future by going through these policies and how it will affect me and my position. So I do feel that I need the time and the opportunity to go through these things diligently and with precise and precision to verify what is necessary and what are the tools that I need and how these are going to affect me in the future and our children in the future, our board in the future. We all need that time, and I'm asking for that time. So I think I have the intelligence to do it if given the time. I think we all should do it. We're here to work together. And what I'm seeing right now is taking time, too much time in the wrong areas. And this to me is ludicrous. I'm sorry. We need to focus more in on student outcome, and we need to get together as a whole and get to a conclusion and to make sure we can do better for our students and our community in this city. And that's where I stand. I stand for the people. We have policies. We have everybody that's applicable for everything that they have to do, and that's what they govern. However, we as a committee need to get it together as a union, as one, and come to a common goal, and that is to save our children. Thank you.
Personally, for me, I believe in student outcome, even in governance policies. And sometimes that's something that we look over. Is still focusing on our students and their outcome, both academically and also in the school climate. But I also when I look at this policy, I question the urgency. And is the lack of this policy or this proposed policy any threat to our student outcome? And if not, I believe that we should delay this conversation until we do have a more consensus on what's going on, what we are going to do in the future as a board, and the governance that we must need in our policies. I do believe that there must be a process that is connected to our bylaws, but I believe that the conversation is not now. The conversation should happen later. And when we do have this conversation, we should also include and look at how are we truly focusing on student outcome in this policy and in the creation of this policy. Thank you.
thank you so much. Okay,
Commissioner
so,
Powell, can I just ask when people are talking about student outcomes that they start to define that because that literally means different things for different folks, especially on this board in particular. And I've heard a number of commissioners tonight mention it, say it, but put no actual meaning behind what they mean when they make that statement so that both the public listening has a clear understanding of what specifically they mean by that versus a general statement,
What
especially when we're talking about governance. and again, clarifying what that actually means. Because we tend to use student focus or student outcomes. What does that mean? What does that mean in the context of this conversation? Like, give actual concrete points, data, evidence that suggests that you know specifically what you're talking about, and you clarify what you mean by that to everyone listening, including your colleague.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, since Commissioner LeBron got a second crack at the mic, I'm going to let our Commissioner-elect, who's come back to the mic, an opportunity to respond. Then I want to move on, okay? Because I see where things are going.
What we have seen systematically is when we have stability, we have better student outcome. When we look systematically and even at our current report and our audit report, when we have seen stability in administration and stability on our board, we have seen the outcome of our students become better. So I believe that when we look at this policy and how we discuss this governance policy, how can we discuss it so things are done in a manner that we are not creating an instability in these departments that's affecting our students? So when I speak about student outcome connecting with governance, that's what I mean.
Thank you for coming back to the mic. So we don't have consensus to move on, even with walking through the language, okay? So where does that leave us? There are a few things in this policy besides this new language that are basically technical language that we kind of got to get through. So my suggestion is that we, that the next, I don't want to, my suggestion, my first suggestion, do with it what you will, is that we work on a policy that excludes all of this new language. And that could go forward, and pay attention to some of the other language changes in our track changes that were not disputed by, or where alternatives were not presented by council. I'm looking particularly at page 1, special meetings and work sessions. Some of that language is, it just removes the word study and replaces the word work. 1 second, Commissioner Malloy. There's another technical change to page 2 that instead of referring to a specific version of Robert's rules, would look at the most recent version. That makes perfect sense to me. And then I think there's a section, a reference to the Student Leadership Council's bylaws. Is that in here too, Charisma? That's the bottom of page 6, top of page 7. So those I think are uncontroversial language, and I'll try something else if this doesn't fly with y'all. But if we strip out all of the leadership language, paragraph 5 and all of its subparagraphs to be taken up later, we can resolve the issue of some of these technical problems. And this is literally the last policy in the manual that has not been approved, either with or without amendments. So Commissioner Malloy, then Commissioner Elliott.
I'd like to make a motion to call the question.
There's no question on the table. The question on the table.
And discussion.
No.
That's out of order because we don't have a motion on the floor.
So let me just ask my question if I can. I'm willing to, I don't know how we do this, but to your point, the other areas that, seem to be just technical, grammatical errors that we can, I think we can support all of those. All of us can support those. But I also think that we need to have a timeline on this as well. So if the next policy meeting is, whenever that date is, I think that needs to go on the agenda. And we need to work this and flesh this out. And so
what you're saying is you don't want it to linger on.
And I don't even politically want it not to be on the agenda because we need to address it. And some, we either turn it down or we're going to, make some recommendations to this section. And so I think that.
So Cynthia, because this policy was ready for a vote prior to it coming back to committee, would you like to make a motion to strip the language of section 5 out and return it to the board in its current state?
I make that motion.
Is there a second? Again, this just kicks the can about this leadership discussion down the road, but it allows us to get through some of the technical fixes, and then we can talk about the timeline after that.
So does that mean we'll be voting on it in the, okay, and then bring it?
Without section 5.
Right.
Is that a compromise folks can live where we can say we've reviewed the policy, we've fixed things that have to be fixed, but we're not done with it? We can always bring it back
Yeah,
as soon as we have a policy committee chair that's ready to tackle it. Is anyone willing to second that?
Second.
I have a second. Commissioner Elliott, a motion. Commissioner Patterson, second. See, there's a lot of hesitancy here, so let's do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Powell, I'll just add briefly that the edits that I proposed were limited to section 5, so the rest of as you highlighted, the rest of the policy was mostly grammatical and updates of necessary items.
Thank you for affirming that. This would, like I said, the tough questions will be preserved. Both versions will be preserved, and the next committee chair can fast track it as need be. Commissioner Adams, what is your vote?
My vote is no.
To technical fixes?
But,
To just doing technical fixes?
so what technical adjustments?
The student leadership, right now, bottom of page 6 refers to the old Student Advisory Board, doesn't even use the language of Student Leadership Congress, doesn't refer to their bylaws. There's some changes up in referring to the most recent version of Robert's Rules on page 2, and language around special meetings versus work sessions on page 1.
So in other words,
That's the only thing that will go forward.
Yeah, Commissioner Adams, we will not be voting on the language around the leadership, only the grammatical stuff that needs to be updated. So we would take that to the board with the current language remaining in, not the language that you see highlighted in yellow. That we will not be voting on. But just when you go up on the, if you could just take it up on the computer, see, like, yeah, where it says, for example, where it says human resources, that word is changed to human capital. And if you go up, you'll see where it says a reference to Robert's Rules of Order, that kind of language. And I think on the first page, there was some language on page 1. Is that page 1?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. There was just some technical language in formatting in that. That's all that we're asking to move to the committee, to the full board for vote. The other language will not be approved. That's what will be discussed in the next policy meeting.
All right, I'll vote.
Yeah, it won't be that other language around the leadership. Just to get those technical pieces out of the way so that the committee can focus in on the leadership piece at the next policy meeting.
Okay. So that's a yes from Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Malloy?
It's a no for me. I believe that we can have someone propose new language to the policy once we meet again with our new policy chair. If this is a policy that we really want to have a discussion on, that we can decide to do that then, but I don't believe that we should be voting on it. Thank you.
For Commissioner Malloy, Commissioner Simmons?
I'm okay looking at the technical aspects, the grammatical, that I want to make sure I'm looking at that, listening to that right. Grammatical and technical language, that's it.
So that's a yes?
So
Okay.
that'll be a yes.
Commissioner Elliott?
Yes.
Commissioner Patterson?
And that also refers to 4, am I correct? committees of the Board of Education. It also refers to that section, because I had a question there also, relative to a grammatical error.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right, so it's a yes for me.
Okay, it's a yes for Commissioner Patterson. Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah. Yes, repeat.
You're voting yes for those technical changes, and I vote yes. It carries. It will be back on the agenda for December 21 for a vote. It has to pass by 2/3 vote. Board bylaws always have to pass by 2/3 vote. And then, but the hard stuff is still ahead of you guys. The language is preserved. I did the best I could to bring you language that would respond to historical issues, that would hold folks accountable, but accountable for their conduct as board members, as committee chairs. Because my personal belief is that you should not hold, that a committee chair or a board president should be held accountable for how they run their meetings, whether they're, being, abusing their authority or abusing their fellow board members, or also being negligent. I can tell you that in my tenure, I think it was Commissioner Adams reminded me of it after the last meeting, that we've had several policy committee chairs that didn't do their work. And if we'd had the language that would support their removal, someone else could have put in their place and the policies work could have moved forward. So I thank you for this compromise. My work is done. We've had our vote. It passes, what was it, 5-2? 6-1? 6-1. So that concludes the business of this committee, except for the survey. I'm sorry?
I have a question.
About the policy that we just,
A proposal.
a proposed change to what we just moved? Oh, I think that'll have to get taken up along with the discussion.
I'm learning.
Commissioner Patterson has asked, what about going back to committees of 3 versus 7? That's up to you guys to work out along with the leadership questions. So this issue is closed now. We've reached as much agreement as we're going to reach on this topic. What I was going to say is regarding the survey, I was going to give out a report of what the survey answers were during my tenure here, and I forgot to put the PowerPoint together, so I'll throw in the world's shortest PowerPoint in my policy committee report on the 21st, okay? If you would please fill out the survey, and I did hear Commissioner Adams move to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Patterson beat you to it, Commissioner Simmons. We have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for your indulgence. I appreciate it.